had I stayed in Korea, especially back in 96 when they didn't have the advent of internet and smartphones, etc., I feel like I would have learned Korean pretty well. Welcome, beautiful people, to the Lost and Local podcast. This is your boy, Adam, coming to you from the Traveling On Studios here in Seoul, South Korea. If you are new here, welcome. Now, of course, you may have noticed again, my co-host Hannah is not here, but shout out to her. When we get her finally onto the podcast, we'll let her explain what is going on. Trust me, it was definitely legit reasons. Now, of course, we do post weekly on Fridays at 8:30 a.m. Korean Standard Time, and that's 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the States when we post our weekly podcast. And just wanted to let you all know, thank you so much for making us a part of your day. You know, last week we talked about uprooted versus rootless. It was kind of contrasting Korean adoptees being uprooted versus TCKs being rootless. Now, of course, those were just generalizations. Not everyone probably resonated with every example. And I know those were kind of generalizations, but I wanted to segue this topic into the episode 37 about the mother tongue equals foreign language. Now, this doesn't always apply to everyone, but I think that not only just for Korean adoptees, but for any TCK who goes to visit or live in their original country of origin, for most of my examples that I can think of, I think of Koreans who were raised in the States but go back to Korea. But you know, of course, not all TCKs struggle with just the language. Of course, my co-host Hannah, she can speak fluently in Korean, but there are still other cultural examples that she doesn't always resonate with. So I have a funny story to tell you all. So the other day, it was just yesterday, my wife and I went to go refill one of my prescriptions, and we went in, we handed the prescription to the pharmacist, or two of them actually there. And we were just talking back and forth, of course, in English. And then when they called us up to pay for the prescription, they started talking to my wife. And now, if you know anything about Koreans tend to love being up in your business. So, of course, they started inquiring and they were bantering back and forth in Korean. Of course, I didn't completely understand what was going on. Of course, I could kind of tell. And they went on to say, like, oh, is he Korean? And then my wife went on to say, oh, no, he actually is Korean. And then they were basically saying, surely he's not adopted, so why doesn't he speak Korean? But of course, she surprised them by saying, oh, actually, he is adopted. And then they were like, oh, that makes sense. And they understood, and they were like, you know, whatever. And so we ended up leaving. And it just reminded me of the fact that that my mother tongue is basically a foreign language. And that's kind of like the catalyst to me thinking of this particular podcast episode. And it was funny because if they would have asked, which they didn't, how long have I been here? And had we told them that I've been here for over 7 years, they probably would have given me a lot more grief. So anecdotally, something I've noticed about TCKs and adoptees is that sometimes when we go back to our motherland, of course, this applies for me to Korea, but this can really apply to anyone that's a TCK from my particular country. There tends to be a little bit of like this reticence, kind of like, you know, I'm not really sure. I'm not really confident. I feel like I need to learn my mother tongue better before I go back to my native country. So I'm kind of a tech geek, and I thought of this analogy. So it's kind of like I have this Korean hardware. I've got the face, the DNA, the hardware of a Korean, but I'm running the United States software. And so this westernized USA software. And so it's kind of like I just basically have the wrong operating system. And I so wish I could just download the Korean operating system, and then I would be good to go living here in Korea. Let me be 100. When I inform people I've been here for 7 years and they come to realize I don't speak Korean well, there is kind of a small amount of shame that I have. Now, I feel like if I were younger, I think I would have a lot more motivation. When I first came to Korea in 1996, I was in my early 20s, and they had us learn Korean for this month long like Motherland tour for Korean adoptees, and we learned how to say the numbering system. We learned how to uh, understand the Korean currency, how to do a little bit of small talk, etc. And I actually kind of learned a decent amount in just a short month. And had I stayed in Korea, especially back in 96 when they didn't have the advent of internet and smartphones, et cetera, I feel like I would have learned Korean pretty well. But fast forward to when I finally moved to Korea in 2018, I was much older. So it was just really, really hard for me to learn the tongue, the motherland tongue. I kind of feel like when a foreigner comes to Korea and they just speak a little bit of Korean, Koreans love it. They're like, oh my gosh, like you're making the effort to learn Korean. And it's like they appreciate the fact that someone that is not natively Korean can speak their language. But if you are a Korean and have a foreigner accent like a Gyopo, obviously not a native Korean speaker, there is honestly and sadly a tendency for Koreans to kind of look down on a person. So another story time. There is a local coffee shop just a stone's throw away from our house. I won't name the company, but we went down there to have a coffee there because we wanted to kind of support this local business. Like 2 years ago, I went to go to it to get a to-go coffee, and it was when I wasn't drinking coffee so that often, and so I didn't really like the bitter taste. But I thought, hey, I drink just straight black coffee, black Americano. Let's try it out one more time. So we went there, and my wife and I were speaking English together, trying to determine what we wanted to order. They also sell chocolates there, so we wanted to order an additional item, and we were bantering back and forth. And we noticed that the owner of the store, or at least the particular person that worked there that day, was actually not that nice. Kind of cold, kind of not really responsive to us, kind of not smiling, even though we, were helping support this business. And he just wasn't that nice of a person. And while honestly I was a little perturbed, I realized that thankfully that's not like the normative experience in Korea these days. Now in 96, I had bad experiences, but now, fast forward to the 21st century, most native Koreans don't treat foreigners this way. But in this situation, it did happen in the last week. If it was the only coffee shop in our neighborhood, I would probably try to go back and be nice. But there's so much competition. I'm definitely not going to go back to this particular coffee shop. But it just got me to realize that, there is a reason why people don't necessarily want to go back to their native country, because there is going to be a little bit of shame, or you are going to be treated a bit different. And that can keep you from embracing your identity. Now, of course, my mother tongue will always be a foreign language for me. Even if, say, somehow, some crazy miracle, I finally learned Korean. But one of the reasons why I bring this topic up is that it is basically to encourage those of you who are TCKs, those of you who are Korean adoptees, those of you, anyone who lives in a different country, but your origins, whether it's from your parents or whether you migrated, for anyone who wants to go back to their native country, but are feeling a little scared to do it. And I just want to encourage you, man, like embrace the opportunity. If you have the opportunity to go back and embrace who you are, go back to your country, and they may not treat you completely kind or generous, but don't let that keep you from experiencing your mother country, your motherland. And ultimately, there is more than just the fluency of language that helps you embrace your culture. While I may not have the complete fluency down of Korean, I do have a lot of the social cues to look and act Korean. Now, of course, the moment I open my mouth, it's a dead giveaway. But I have been part of the Korean community since I was 20 years old. And so I know all the how to physically act Korean, to make sure you kind of do the bowing, we call it insa, to make sure you shake your hand properly with a new person, to say all the right things when you walk into a store and say the right things when you leave. Just, I know all the right ways to behave or act like I am a native. So there are other things that can help you embrace your culture. Just because you don't technically fluently speak the language, there are other ways that you can embrace your culture. And for me, I feel like being older and not having the aptitude, at least a natural aptitude to learn language, I can find solace in the wins that I can find in the other ways of embracing my culture. And for good or for ill, I don't allow the language to deter me from feeling at peace in the country that I was born in. Sure, I mean, of course, it would be nice to speak fluently Korean, but it's all good. One thing that I've learned now that I'm well into my 50s is not to worry about what others think of you. And that's so important. It doesn't matter if you're 20, 30, 40, 50, or if you're a teenager. We should not allow how others judge you to affect our identity, to affect the way that God has created us or the way that our natural personality is. Of course, we don't want to go around offending people, but I think it's really important to feel comfortable in the skin that God gave you. And in the meantime, I mean, technology is ramping up fast, and we've got Papago, we've got large language models like ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Grok. We have the incoming AR glasses that both Apple is rumored to come out with, Samsung and Google. Of course, Meta Ray-Bans are out, but all of that is kind of half-baked right now. But eventually, we will get technology that you'll be able to wear glasses that look like normal glasses. And when people speak to you, you're going to be able to see the translation. That will definitely help me navigate through Korea. Of course, it won't keep me from still realizing and other people realizing that I'm technically not native to Korea. But those will definitely be like huge life improvements. And so there are ways to counter against your inability to speak your mother tongue, I guess. So sage advice from an old man is don't fret over the small things. Sure, make every effort to do your best to learn about the culture that you come back to, if it's your motherland. But don't fret over the fact that you may never be accepted as a native. But hey, enjoy being able to have a foot in both cultures, or for some TCKs, multiple cultures. And don't let that deter you. I think in the end, we do have a tendency to overthink things quite often, which is, I think, natural because some of us want to be people pleasers. We don't want to let people down. We don't want people to look down upon us. And so we might try to overachieve. I mean, life is so short that if we fret and worry about such things, it's going to keep us from embracing where we're from and the things that make us who we are. And whether that's the country that you were raised in or the country that you were born in, you have the right. You have the right to live in both if you want. You have the right to not feel, have prejudice towards you or any of that. And if people are that way, I mean, I think because I did grow up in the States back in the 70s and 80s, it wasn't easy. And so that kind of gave me extra armor and extra ability to kind of not allow the arrows of just people who are being mean to you prevent you from embracing who you are. Of course, it wasn't an easy road, but hey, don't let that keep you from going back to your motherland. Don't let that keep you from being so self-conscious that you don't want to go out when you're visiting, or you only want to go with someone. Yes, I did talk about stories of being with my wife, but I go around in Korea on my own quite often. Whether it's going out to get some coffee, or sometimes I'll go out to eat on my own, or I'll go traveling around on my bike or scooter. And I totally don't care if obviously people react differently to me. So often I'll try to be like, 따뜻한 Americano 주세요. That's so bad. But I'll say something like that, which means basically a hot Americano, please. And it's obviously, to the Koreans, they know that I don't speak Korean, but at least I'm trying to make it the effort. I could say hot Americano, please. And while some people do that, I try to at least speak Korean a little bit. Of course, oftentimes, especially if the person's younger, they'll respond back to me in English, which is obviously, they know that my accent is probably from the States. But yeah, I find that it's fun to at least make the effort. And granted, my Korean is really bad, but yeah, it doesn't bother me. And at the end of the day, don't let any of those things deter you from embracing your mother tongue, embracing your motherland. And I don't know, maybe hopefully through some crazy miracle, I'll finally get the motivation to learn Korean. I actually do have several resources I can go to. I'm a little lazy. At the end of the day, we're all travelers. We're all sojourners. And if you have the privilege to go back to your mother country, your motherland, embrace it. Don't let people keep you from that. And if you end up living in your motherland, just find the peace that you need. Like myself, I find peace even though I don't speak the language. Maybe one day I will. But until then, I'm just enjoying the privilege of being here in my country, here in South Korea. And for the rest of you, who knows where that's going to lead you. But in the meantime, this again was a fun little podcast. I hope you all are doing well. Stay safe. Hope you can spend time with loved ones as the Christmas season is fast approaching us. And we'll see you back next week. God bless. Peace.